What's going on, everyone? Alex here. So we're going to be continuing on with this writing tips series, and this is going to be dedicated to you aspiring writers and you current writers. Now, one of the big stumbling blocks that a lot of you guys, and including myself, have faced and are currently facing is finding the motivation to not only write something, anything in the first place, but to write consistently. And we can often throw ourselves off writing every day and finding ways to continually refuel our interest in our writing. And a lot of people ask me how I can be so prolific and how I can continue coming up with so many different ideas. And I wanted to revert back to an interesting thing that I discovered in reading a book about writing a couple of years ago that really helped, although I had found that I'd been doing a lot of what was shared in the book up until that point. But I wanted to share that with you. Now, this is a book about writing fiction. It's called Writing into the Dark, and I can't remember off the top of my head who wrote it. Writing into the Dark. It was a book about the critical voice and how a lot of us can throw ourselves off getting excited and interested in our writing because we are writing through the perspective, through the lens of the critical voice who's always continually trying to edit and criticize and overanalyze as we write. And it throws us off. It makes writing tedious and high pressure and difficult ultimately. And it's the number one reason why most people find themselves kind of self-sabotaging and quitting. And a really interesting part of the book that just completely switched a light bulb on in my head was the idea that those writers who tend to stay in the game longer, who tend to fall in love with the process and write tons and stay in the game for longer ultimately, are those people who write into the dark. They are pantsers, i.e. they don't get stuck in the planning process too much. They actually, this might not necessarily be true for many, and there's probably quite a few writers who do plan and do outline, but they from what I can see, they don't tend to be the ones who fall into the category of writing tons of books and having a prolific output. And what they do is they lean into the exploratory side of writing, and they see writing as more of a process of discovery as they write, as opposed to the polar opposite, which is what many writers spend their time doing, which is to have everything planned out in their minds ahead of the time before committing to the actual writing. So they already know the ending of the story. And his argument was that you bore yourself because you know the ending, you know the outcome, and it loses its shine. There's no longer anything fun about the writing process because you know exactly what's going to pan out. And it really struck me because that's happened to me many times. When I know the full outline of my article, when I know the full outline of what I'm doing overall at a macro level, when I know the outline and the story of my books, it's no longer exciting. It's like I know exactly what's going to happen. So you're no longer being pulled through this journey as you write. And I think that's really crucial. I think in order to stay interested and motivated about the writing, you need to find a way to look forward to writing in the first place. And this holds a lot of people back. And I think this is a real secret to not only writing prolifically in the fiction world, but also for you non-fiction writers. How can we apply this kind of thinking to writing articles, to writing copy, even copywriting perhaps, maybe not so much, but writing non-fiction books and that kind of stuff, blogging. We need to find a way to incorporate more of an exploratory approach to the process. Now, when it comes to articles, I think this shows up in a couple of ways. Firstly, this is something that I talk about a lot, which is there are numerous phases that the writing process is broken down into, and you don't want to find yourself in the editing process too early on. That's the critical voice coming in. That's the over-analysis coming in too soon. You want to instead revert back to an earlier phase in that process, which is a kind of exploratory process of discovery, where you're free writing without any pressure to come up with anything in particular, but you're just having fun with the process of just writing whatever comes to mind and seeing if you stumble on any interesting insights. And you'll be surprised at what lies beneath, what lies in the subconscious, what lies in this kind of, in the darker corners of the mind. There's a window that you can go through and explore when you start getting into motion, and you might uncover an enormous kingdom of magic and color and depth. And say you're 25 years old, think about how many experiences and thoughts and memories and events that have happened to you in your life up until that point that have been stored in this deeper cavity that you are not allowing yourself to discover because you're getting too hung up on writing the right way, instead of loosening up through free writing, through letting your mind wander, through a process of more reflective creativity, you might discover that there's all kinds of stories and interesting facts and lessons that you've learned that you are just waiting to discover. And that's what I'm talking about. This makes writing become an adventure. You don't want to find yourself having everything figured out before you start writing. You want to have the adventure and the exploration weaved into the full process if you can, or at least the early stages of the process, so that the final bits just move quickly and you just get straight to editing more quickly. So think about it in those terms. If you're finding it difficult to get excited about writing, find a way to bring exploration and discovery into the process. See what comes up. See what you've got hidden away, what gems you've got hidden away in the recesses of your mind. And use writing as a tool to get you there. Use writing as a cart that takes you along these various tracks into the dark caverns, and see what kinds of things you can pick up that you can then haul back and bring back to the world and present through your article, through your book. Now that's looking at things at a micro level, and that's really helpful. I've discovered so many weird insights that have proven to be very popular with other people, and I think a lot of the reason behind that is because we tend to share the same understanding of what's really true and interesting and meaningful. That's looking at things at the micro level, at the level of like writing individual articles and kind of getting yourself loosened up to finding those ideas. But there's also another way you can bring exploration in to your writing career, and that's looking at things at the macro level, where we're starting to accumulate bits and pieces of writing together, whether it's tweets, LinkedIn posts, articles, newsletters. It's seeing things when you step outside. You've got this kind of accumulating body of work that's only really going to come, you're only going to be able to create so prolifically when you find a way ultimately to continue discovering and bringing discovery into the process of building up a big body of work. So I find that when people are committed to only focusing on quality, critical voice comes in way too quickly, and it can often be off-putting, and it can mean that many people quit because they're only focused on creating works of absolutely outrageous quality, and you can kind of get very overly analytical about making it perfect and hold yourself back. I'm sure you're familiar with that. This is why when we focus on volume and creating more and contributing to the wider whole, right? So you're not looking so much at individual pieces anymore. You're looking at what can I really build here over the stretch of 20, 30 years? What kind of a body of work can I contribute to? And you're only really going to find that easy to stomach when you focus on volume, and you also focus on using volume as a means to get you to exploration, if that makes sense. It's very difficult to reach volume when you're not exploring. If it's just a case of uncovering thoughts that come to mind without putting too much thought into it, if that makes sense. Maybe you've done some research and you've found some interesting external idea that you can plonk down. You're gonna lose interest fast. There's so much to uncover that is going to contribute to prolific output when we view what we do at the macro level through a kind of exploratory lens. What can you discover through putting out lots of content? It's only through putting out lots of content and focusing on volume that you're going to start surprising yourself. It's when you put down many words, it's when you accumulate day after day after day that things start to get spicy, things start to get interesting. So give that thought to kind of sum up. See if you can weave an exploratory thread through your writing. Instead of focusing on having everything figured out in advance, see if you can surprise yourself as you go along. That's it from me today before we hit the 10-minute point. If you've got any other questions, comments, leave them down below. We'll see you in the next writing tips video.